April 16th, 1945. Just before dawn, the air over eastern Germany was cold, wet, and heavy with fog. The kind of fog that presses down on the land and makes every sound feel closer, sharper, more dangerous. On the western edge of the Oder River, the ground was quiet, too quiet. German General Gotthard Heinrici stood inside his command bunker near the village of Seelow, staring at his maps under dim light. He was listening, not to voices, not to radios, but to the silence itself. After more than 30 years as a soldier, he knew this silence was not peace. It was the breath being drawn before a killing blow. At exactly 5 a.m., the world exploded. In a single second, more than 3,000 Soviet artillery shells slammed into the German front line. The ground shook so violently that men were thrown off their feet even hundreds of meters away. Trees snapped like twigs. Bunkers collapsed. Trenches vanished. The noise was beyond sound. It was pressure. It crushed the chest. It blurred vision. It erased thought. If you want more content like this, subscribe now and comment below. In that instant, Hinrichi understood a truth he would never forget. His army, no matter how well prepared, was being wiped away by sheer force. This was not just another battle. This was the last great defensive stand before Berlin. This was the Battle of the Seelow Heights. And it was here that one of Germany's most skilled defensive generals watched everything he had built begin to disappear almost instantly. Gotthard Heinrici was not a fanatical Nazi general. He was not known for reckless attacks or blind loyalty. Born on December 25, 1886, in East Prussia, Hinrichi was a professional soldier shaped by the First World War. He had learned early that modern war rewarded patience, caution, and preparation more than bravery. On the Eastern Front, where the Red Army relied heavily on artillery, Hinrichi became famous for one thing: survival. Other generals lost armies trying to hold ground at all costs. Hinrichi learned when to pull back. He studied Soviet habits. He noticed patterns. Soviet attacks almost always began with massive artillery barrages. Hinrichi trained his men to expect them, to withdraw just before impact, and to return once the shells stopped. This method saved thousands of German lives during battles near Smolensk, Rzhev, and later in Romania. By early 1945, however, the situation had changed completely. Germany was collapsing from all sides. In the west, American and British forces crossed the Rhine. In the east, the Red Army stood on the Oder River, the final natural barrier before Berlin. The distance from the Oder to the German capital was less than 70 kilometers. Nothing of real strength stood between them except one line of hills, the Seelow Heights. On March 20, 1945, Adolf Hitler appointed Hinrichi as commander of Army Group Vistula. The name sounded powerful. The reality was not. Hinrichi inherited a shattered force. Fewer than 100,000 soldiers spread across a wide front. Many were teenagers from the Hitler Youth. Others were old men from the Volkssturm. Some units existed only on paper. Tanks were scarce. Fuel was rationed. Ammunition was limited. Air support was nearly gone. Still, Hinrichi did what he always did. He studied the ground. The Seelow Heights rose about 30 to 50 meters above the Oder floodplain. They were not mountains. They were not dramatic. But they mattered. Any force advancing from the east would have to cross the flat, swampy floodplain first, completely exposed, then climb uphill under fire. Hinrichi understood this was his one chance. He ordered a layered defense. The first line was light, designed to delay. The second line held the main force, dug deep into the slopes. The third line protected artillery and reserves. Minefields were laid carefully. Anti-tank guns were positioned to cover narrow approaches. Every advantage the terrain offered was used. Across the river, Soviet Marshal Georgy Zhukov was preparing something on a scale the world had never seen. Zhukov commanded the First Belarusian Front, more than 1 million men. His force included 5 combined arms armies, 2 tank armies, and massive artillery formations. In total, over 20,000 artillery pieces, mortars, and rocket launchers were gathered along the Oder. It was the greatest concentration of firepower in human history, up to that point. Zhukov's orders were simple. Breakthrough. Take Berlin. Do it fast. He knew the Seelow Heights would be costly. He also knew Stalin was watching. Another Soviet commander, Ivan Konev, was advancing south of him. The first to reach Berlin would earn glory. Failure was not an option. On April 14th and 15, Soviet engineers built bridges across the Oder. Artillery units moved into position night after night. Guns were placed so close together that crews could barely move between them. Katyusha rocket launchers were lined up in long rows. Ammunition dumps stretched for kilometres. Each gun had hundreds of shells prepared. German reconnaissance planes spotted the build-up. Prisoners spoke of it. Hinrichi knew what was coming. He just did not know how massive it would be. The night of April 15th was miserable. Rain soaked the ground. Fog rolled in from the river. German soldiers sat in muddy trenches, cold and exhausted. Many had not slept properly in days. Some wrote quick letters by flashlight. Others stared into the darkness, waiting. Officers moved quietly, checking positions, whispering encouragement they barely believed themselves. Hinrichi made a decision that night that showed both his experience and the limits of even the best preparation. He ordered many frontline units to pull back several hundred meters before dawn. He expected the Soviet artillery to hit the first trench line hardest. Let the shells fall on empty positions. Let the enemy waste ammunition. Then counterattack. It was a smart decision. It had worked before, but this time the scale of fire would make it almost meaningless. At exactly 5 a.m. on April 16th, the Soviet artillery opened fire. The opening barrage lasted less than a minute, but it changed everything. Over 9,000 guns fired at once. The sky lit up as if the sun had risen instantly. Shells fell so densely that explosions overlapped, merging into a single, continuous shockwave. In some sectors, more than 3,000 shells landed in 1 second. The Seelow Heights disappeared behind fire, smoke, and dirt. Even trenches that were empty collapsed. Bunkers were crushed. Mines exploded under the force. Shockwaves travelled through the ground, killing men who were lying flat, far from the impact points. Communication lines were cut immediately. Radios went silent. Telephone wires were shredded. Hinrichi received reports for a few moments. Then nothing. Entire battalions vanished as organised units. Officers were killed before giving orders. Soldiers stumbled blindly through smoke, deafened and stunned. Some ran back, some ran forward, many simply froze. The barrage did not stop. Katyusha rockets screamed overhead, leaving trails of fire and smoke. Their psychological effect was devastating. The sound alone broke men who had survived years of war. German artillery tried to respond, but many guns were destroyed before firing a single round. Then came something new. Zhukov ordered more than 140 searchlights to be switched on behind the Soviet lines. The plan was to blind the German defenders and illuminate the battlefield for the advancing infantry. But the fog and smoke reflected the light back. Instead of blinding the Germans, it created glowing walls of haze. Soviet soldiers advanced into confusion. Units lost direction. Timing broke down. For a brief moment, the German defence fought back. Surviving machine gun nests opened fire. Anti-tank guns knocked out Soviet tanks that moved too fast. Infantry units fired from secondary positions Hinrichi had prepared. The floodplain became a killing ground. Soviet losses in the first waves were severe, but the Red Army had numbers the Germans could not match. The artillery continued in rolling barrages, moving forward metre by metre. Whenever German resistance appeared, it was crushed by concentrated fire. Soviet commanders adjusted quickly. New batteries replaced damaged ones. Ammunition seemed endless. By mid-morning, German reserves were ordered forward. Many were hit before reaching the line. Roads were cratered, vehicles burned, horses panicked, orders could not get through. Hinrichi's careful defensive plan unravelled as units became isolated and overwhelmed. On April 17th, the pressure increased. Zhukov committed more infantry and armour. Soviet tanks pushed through gaps in the German line. Close combat erupted in villages and forests along the heights. German soldiers fought with desperation, using Panzerfausts at close range. Some succeeded, most did not survive. Hinrichi requested permission to withdraw to prepared secondary positions. Hitler refused. From his bunker in Berlin, Hitler believed the situation could still be reversed. He ordered counterattacks that did not exist on maps and reinforcements that did not exist in reality. He accused his generals of weakness. He demanded the heights be held at all costs. Hinrichi knew better. Holding meant destruction. On April 18th, Soviet tank armies broke through decisively. Once armour moved past the heights, the defensive position lost all meaning. Hinrichi ordered a withdrawal anyway, disobeying direct orders because staying would mean total annihilation. By April 19th, the Seelow Heights were fully in Soviet hands. The cost was enormous. The Red Army suffered over 30,000 casualties in 4 days. But they could replace them. Germany could not. Entire divisions ceased to exist. The road to Berlin was open. Within days, Soviet forces surrounded the capital. On April 30th, Adolf Hitler took his own life. On May 2nd, Berlin surrendered. On May 8th, 1945, the war in Europe ended. Years later, Hinrichi described the opening barrage at Seelow as the most intense artillery fire he had ever witnessed. He had prepared for it. He had predicted it. And still, it overwhelmed everything. The Battle of the Seelow Heights showed the final reality of World War II. Experience mattered. Skill mattered. But against industrial-scale firepower, unleashed without pause, even the best defence could be erased in seconds. In one moment, thousands of shells rewrote the fate of a nation. And one general, standing in the darkness before dawn, knew the war was lost the instant the earth began to shake. If you want more content like this, subscribe now and comment below.